Good morning. I'm Bracken Hendricks, Senior Fellow with the Center for American Progress in Washington, D.C. And first I want to thank the Heinrich Böll Foundation for bringing together a really important international dialogue and for inviting me here to address you today on the topic of green growth and how we can use investment to build a low-carbon energy future. In the United States and globally, the promise of building a clean energy economy is transforming not only our strategies for reducing the threat of global warming, but in some ways, even more importantly, it's challenging the notions of economic development and global competitiveness and how we pursue prosperity. Green growth isn't a replacement for climate policy, and I don't want to sugarcoat what I know is a deep and ongoing frustration, both in the international community and in my own country, around the difficulty that the United States has had in delivering binding commitments to reduce our contributions to global warming. But I also want to share some reflections today on why I believe we're making real progress right now in reshaping the footprint of our economy to live within natural limits, and why over the longer term I'm extremely optimistic that the United States will emerge as an important contributor to the development of a green economy, and will in the end be a powerful partner for Europe and globally in meeting the challenge of rebuilding the economy on the foundation of low-carbon energy. And green growth is at the heart of this challenge and this strategy. On the political front, it's been a tough fight over the last 2 years. Very deep partisan divisions within the United States Congress led to the collapse of recent efforts by President Obama to pass a binding carbon cap and to impose a price on global warming pollution. But it was the first time in American history that we've gotten as far as we did. And though it was a bitter defeat, and really in many ways it was much too little and much too late, there's another important story behind the failure of cap and trade bill to win 60 votes in the Senate. Within this debate that we just had, I believe, are the seeds of future progress and a very different outcome, grounded in a national discussion on greening economic development and deciding what kind of a future we want to build. While regulating carbon emissions remains a lightning rod in the United States politics, when the tables are turned and we look at it, at what it will take to build the solutions to global warming, it turns out that an entirely different political debate is possible. Strong majorities and strong alliances that cut across ideology, region, and party lines can be achieved in support of getting on with the business of rebuilding the economy for low-carbon energy in a way that's sometimes blocked when we challenge carbon emissions head-on. The politics playing out in the United States are in many ways not unlike the dynamics in the European community, and the great diversity within your own politics and economics and the fossil fuel dependence across regions and nations. States like West Virginia and Montana are major exporters of coal to other parts of the country, while Washington State and the Pacific Northwest have a legacy of New Deal investments in affordable hydroelectric resources. Louisiana and Texas are the seats of our petrochemical industry and refining, while the desert Southwest is looking to export solar power to the rest of the country. And Michigan and Ohio are home to a U.S. manufacturing industry that feels deeply under attack and is very dependent on coal for their energy, while states like California and New England have a legacy of high prices but very, very efficient clean energy use. So these differences in economic and political and energy circumstances make for an extremely complicated politics, where, especially when you look at the fact that energy is regulated by the states in the United States of America. These are not unlike the divisions playing out from east to west in Europe, if you look at Denmark or Germany, and the very different circumstances faced by the Czech Republic or Poland. And they make for some tough internal debates. But what I want to talk about today, as we look at the green economy, is that when you flip this conversation from attacking coal or reining in carbon emissions to greening the economy, creating jobs, rebuilding infrastructure, and building consensus on restoring economic competitiveness through investments in low-carbon energy, then a very different political dynamic holds sway. And while our own comprehensive energy and climate legislation went down over a debate on cap and trade, there was a great deal that could be embraced even by hardened climate skeptics within that debate. These are sometimes called complementary policies, and they represent very, very broad, far-reaching measures to deploy clean energy. Included in that bill were tools for rebuilding cities with energy efficiency, repowering industry with renewable energy, restoring the auto industry with next-generation manufacturing, and for building smart grids to meet energy challenges with enhanced information technology. Many of these policies and proposals will continue to build steam, even in the wake of the defeat of cap and trade. And this really fundamentally informs the United States' strategy moving forward in this difficult period. This is a really important story that was too often obscured in the bitter debate over carbon pricing. And many of these measures actually enjoy very strong bipartisan support in the United States Congress, politically, and backing from industry and labor groups, as you'll hear later today, and the engagement of a very broad cross-section of Americans across regions with very differing economic and political concerns. Specific measures that continue to gain interest include establishing a green bank, which would drive down the cost of capital for building renewable energy projects domestically, or retrofitting homes and offices substantially to cut energy use. It's also really important to know that the Green Bank had the broad support across the United States government and even won the endorsement of the very strongly Republican and fiercely anti-cap and trade U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Another measure called Homestar may soon launch as a multi-billion-dollar effort to build a whole home energy-saving retrofit industry in the United States, which would create jobs in the construction trades by radically improving energy efficiency in America's building stock, 20, 30, and even higher percent above the energy that we currently use to power our homes and offices. Homestar, it's interesting to note, passed the U.S. House of Representatives with very strong bipartisan support on the very day after President Obama signed his bitterly contested health care legislation over Republican objections. And even in that context, it was able to get very strong Republican votes. So on this agenda, we can make tremendous progress. We can deliver real emission reductions. And it will come from focusing on the opportunity instead of the sacrifice. So while the United States has been slow to join the global community in carbon regulation, our experience also points toward a path forward. The debate in the United States has shown time and again that when we focus on building practical solutions and deploying new technology to reduce our dependence on wasteful energy, to cut reliance on fossil fuels, and to drive down emissions by investing in innovation, there is a huge opportunity for a groundswell of support. And you can see a similar pattern emerging globally. A global treaty eluded negotiators in Copenhagen, but they did emerge with a global consensus on steps forward in the realm of investment. The interests of both North and the South aligned around commitments for implementing new financing mechanisms, for taking steps to avoid deforestation, and for tech transfer to invest in developing leapfrog technology for global development that look to clean energy to drive prosperity. There's a chance today, even in the despair over the failure of commitments and timetables, where we can turn that defeat into a potential victory and an opportunity to seize on these very measures, to build on them, and to ensure that lasting economic changes are realized. This is an achievable strategy for making diplomatic progress, even as we race against the melting of our glaciers. By focusing on deployment and shared interests, and by investing in solutions, to be sure, a comprehensive framework has to be pursued to manage global emissions. But we can't forget that the actual reductions will take place building by building, power plant by power plant, and factory by factory. We can get started on this work today, even as we struggle to build political consensus and a regulatory framework on climate. This is an opportunity for action. So President Obama has put on the table a commitment to a 17% reduction in carbon emissions. He's done this without a treaty and without comprehensive legislation to fall back on. But with nationally legislated measures to deploy clean technology and the strong support of state efforts to limit emissions, I believe we can meet or exceed this target. The United States is making progress on this front. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act committed $80 billion already to clean energy. almost doubling the budget of the U.S. Department of Energy, specifically to fund clean energy, renewables, advanced manufacturing, and the modernization of the grid. For the first time, we've broken ground on high-speed rail projects in transit in over a decade, and billions of dollars were spent on energy efficiency. So in the wake of the collapse of the U.S. auto industry, the President responded by increasing fuel economy standards and launching a program to retool factories. This was all done through the recovery process, not through any negotiation on climate change. And the President actually made investments in taking the U.S. Auto industry's ability to produce lithium-ion batteries from 2% at the start of the Recovery Act to 20% of global markets, with an eye toward supplying 40% of the global need for advanced batteries by 2015. This is a green growth strategy that links clean energy to global competitiveness, and it's an important precedent as we consider how to build support for what's necessary to save the planet in a very, very difficult moment in our economic history. When American workers are worried about layoff notices and closures of plants, and construction workers in some parts of the country face 30% unemployment, depression-era levels, it's too easy for opponents of climate change to demagogue economic fears and roll back all of our environmental protections. But it's proven entirely more difficult for them to oppose investment-focused strategies for clean energy deployment. And while it is certainly a silver lining in a very difficult situation, to be sure, this is a very, very important story emerging from these tough political times in our climate negotiations. So looking forward, as we forge new transatlantic strategies, not only to reverse devastating climate impacts, but to retool the economy on a foundation of advanced technology, more efficient production, and a new generation of value-added products that meet human needs without devastating the planet, there is a great deal that should encourage us in this struggle. And it starts with green growth strategies. We can align our interests around positive solutions as a powerful tool for moving a stuck debate on climate forward. It doesn't replace hard fights on how we ensure reliable environmental protections. But in the United States, it's happening despite a very divided politics. And it's working globally to align the interests of the North and the South, of donor nations and the developing world. And I believe it should give us great hope. Building a green economy offers the seeds of a powerful, positive, and transformative agenda. Those of you gathered here in Prague today deserve great credit for focusing on the issue of green growth and the role of smart policies and smart technologies in radically transforming the productivity and the effectiveness of the global economy to deliver what we want in goods and services without drowning those gains in unintended environmental consequences. So I want to thank the Heinrich Böll Foundation for bringing this group together, for driving the debate on green recovery, and together I believe that we can refocus the world's attention today on what it is that we want to build, on moving forward together to get the job done. With this as our goal, and with the power of the many interests, constituencies, and nations that are represented in the room today, I have little doubt that we can succeed in this work. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing the results of the conversation that will begin here today in this room. I thank you for your efforts.